the night my parents asked me to give away my apartment. The air smelled of lemon polish and something heavier I couldn't name. I had spent the afternoon wiping down the counters, straightening the books on my coffee table, lighting a candle that burned clean and slow. My apartment wasn't just a place to live, it was proof that I'd built a life on my own terms. Every inch of this Pearl District space, from the reclaimed wood floors to the soft gray walls, had passed through my hands. When my phone rang, I almost ignored it. My father, Richard Bennett, rarely called, and when he did, it was usually about something practical: car insurance, taxes, the weather in Austin. This time, his voice carried weight. "Your mother and I need to come by tonight," he said. "Family meeting." The words pressed against my chest. I hadn't heard that phrase since we were kids, when family meeting meant someone had disappointed them. "Is everything all right?" I asked. "We'll talk when we get there," he said. Then he hung up. For a moment, I stood with the phone in my hand, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator. Maggie Bennett, my mother, hadn't spoken a word. That silence was its own message. I looked around my living room, the low glass table, the gray sofa I'd saved months to buy, the framed sketches from my first design job. They were small trophies from long, sleepless years. Family meeting, I repeated under my breath. Maybe they wanted to reconnect. Maybe they missed me. Or maybe they didn't. By the time the doorbell rang, the candle had burned low. I opened the door to find my parents standing side by side, a casserole dish in my mother's hands like a peace offering. Behind them, my younger sister, Amber Collins, stepped forward, her two children, Ethan and Lily, holding on to her coat sleeves. I hadn't expected them. Amber smiled as if she already knew the script. "Hey, Claire," she said lightly. "We thought it'd be good to talk face to face." Her tone was too casual. My parents' eyes didn't meet mine. I stepped aside and let them in, the smell of baked cheese and something faintly sweet following. As the door closed behind them, I noticed the old house key still resting on the marble tray by the entryway. It caught the light, a small, silver thing that had unlocked every chapter of my adult life. For the first time, I wondered if it was about to unlock something I'd rather keep shut. I told myself it was just dinner. I should have known better. It wasn't the first time I'd been asked to make space. The moment my father said family meeting, something in me had already recognized the old pattern, the quiet expectation that I'd give without protest. When I was little, I lived with my grandmother in San Antonio while my parents worked in Austin. The house was small, the porch swing creaked when the wind turned, and the kitchen always smelled of cornbread and lavender soap. Grandma Jo, as everyone called her, was the one who saw me, not the grades, not the chores, just me. She'd say, "You don't have to be strong all the time. Claire, just honest." I didn't understand how rare that kind of love was until she was gone. I was 5 when Amber was born, and the air in our house changed. My parents moved back to San Antonio, and suddenly every shelf, every conversation, every ounce of attention leaned toward her. She was a glowing, noisy little miracle: new toys, new clothes, every wish granted before it was even spoken. I didn't mind at first. I loved her laugh. I loved the way she'd wrap her tiny hand around my finger like I was part of her world. But the difference grew with her. When she turned 6, she got a dollhouse the size of a coffee table. I got a pat on the shoulder and a, "You're such a good big sister." When she turned 16, she got a red convertible gleaming in the driveway. I was still pedaling my bike to my part-time job at the diner, saving tips for college brochures my parents never asked about. I once asked Dad why things were different. He looked up from his newspaper and said, "She needs it more." "You're fine." Mom nodded beside him like it was gospel. That word "fine" hung in my chest for years. It meant capable, independent, low maintenance. It also meant invisible. When Grandma passed, they were too busy planning Amber's birthday to notice that I'd barely eaten for days. That week, my mother handed me a used book wrapped in leftover gift paper, I remember thinking it smelled faintly of the porch swing, old wood, and dust and memory. I learned that being fine was the easiest way to be forgotten. Now, standing in my own home decades later, hearing my father's voice again, I could almost feel that porch swing move in the wind. And I knew this meeting would ask for something I wasn't willing to give anymore. The casserole dish sat steaming on my dining table, its smell too heavy for the room. My parents took their usual seats as if they'd never left, while Amber eased onto the sofa, crossing her legs and scanning the apartment like a buyer assessing square footage. Ethan and Lily scattered toward the corner, tugging off their shoes, their voices high and bright. I poured coffee, trying to keep things light. "It's been a while since we all sat together." I said, "How's everyone doing?" My father, Richard, folded his hands on the table. "We need to discuss something important." The tone landed like a gavel. My mother, Maggie, looked at the casserole as if it were the reason we'd gathered. Amber reached for her mug, eyes gleaming with that calm confidence she always carried when the odds were stacked in her favor. Richard cleared his throat. "Your sister and her kids need a stable home. We think you should give her this apartment." For a second, the words didn't register. The candle flickered on the counter. The hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. Then it hit. Cold and sharp. "You think I should what I said." My voice low. Amber didn't flinch. "It's a great space. Claire. Close to good schools. Safe neighborhood. The kids love it here already." She smiled, motioning toward them as they rolled their toy cars along my hardwood floors. Maggie added softly, "It's only fair. Honey, you're doing fine." She's struggling. That word again. Fine. I heard it echo across years. "This is my home," I said. "I worked for it. I built it from the ground up." Richard leaned back, unmoved. "Family means helping each other. She needs it more than you." The old logic, delivered in the same measured voice, the same verdict dressed as virtue. Before I could answer, Ethan's laughter broke the tension. He'd found a set of markers on my desk. I turned just as he and Lily began drawing bright red loops across the wall near the window. "Hey, sweetie," I started, moving toward them, but Amber waved me off without looking up from her coffee. "Kids will be kids," she said. I froze. The streaks glared against the pale gray paint color I'd mixed myself, sanded smooth with my own hands. I expected my parents to react, but they didn't. Maggie stared at her lap. Richard reached for his coffee. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the air itself was pressing down. I gently took the markers from the children, setting them aside. "It's okay," I whispered, though it wasn't. Amber leaned back, surveying the room with a small, satisfied sigh. "It really is perfect," she murmured. Something in me cracked then, not loud, not visible, just a quiet splinter beneath the ribs. After they left, I spent an hour scrubbing the red lines off the wall. The stains wouldn't budge. The next morning, my arm ached, but the streaks still glimmered faintly in the light. They looked like a signature one I never agreed to sign. After they left, I sat on the couch, staring at the faint red stains on the wall until the room blurred. My fingers still smelled of cleaning solution, my throat of swallowed words. It wasn't just the mess, it was the feeling that I'd seen this moment before, in different rooms, with different excuses. Back in college, I learned early that no one was coming to rescue me. While my classmates spent weekends out on 6th Street, I was working the late shift at a coffee shop, sketching room layouts on napkins between customers. Every dollar I saved was another inch of distance between me and the life my parents reserved for Amber. When I landed my first internship with a design firm in Dallas, I called home, excited. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," my mother said, her voice warm but distracted. Then she added, "Did you hear Amber's been cast in a play?" I remember gripping the phone tighter, smiling so she wouldn't hear the silence on my end. That's great, I said. I never mentioned the internship again. Years later, I stopped calling altogether. I told myself it was easier that way, that independence was its own kind of love. But the truth is, I still waited for them to notice. I wanted one message, one small acknowledgement that I was building something worth seeing. It never came. So I built my own version of home every beam, every inch of paint proof that I'd made it without them. Now, staring at those red streaks, I could almost hear my father's voice again. She needs it more. You're fine. Fine. The word that meant strong, capable, unworthy of help. I wiped at the stain one last time, the cloth gray with effort. It didn't fade. Neither did the lesson. A week passed before I saw them again. I'd convinced myself the family meeting had been a bad dream, one I could scrub away like the stains on the wall. But one Saturday morning, a knock came. Sharp and cheerful, followed by my sister's voice. "Claire, it's us." When I opened the door, Amber stood there, bright as ever, a paper cup of coffee in one hand and her 2 kids behind her like a ready-made excuse. "We were in the neighborhood," she said. "Thought we'd stop by." Before I could answer, Ethan darted past me, followed by Lily dragging a stuffed rabbit. Within minutes, the apartment that once hummed with quiet turned into a storm, cereal crumbs on the rug, crayons rolling under the sofa, cartoons echoing from my phone because she'd handed it to them for entertainment. Amber kicked off her shoes and sank into the couch. "You don't mind." "Right. They just needed a change of scenery." I forced a smile. "Sure. But please keep an eye on them. Some things are fragile." She waved a dismissive hand. "Relax. Claire, it's just stuff. Just stuff." The lamp they'd knocked over had taken me 3 weekends to restore. The rug was from a client's first project, but I swallowed it down, same as I always did. By the 3rd visit, she didn't even bother to call. I'd come home to find my spare key missing from the tray where my parents once left it. The next afternoon, I walked into the smell of burned toast and spilled juice. Amber stood in my kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear, as if she belonged there. "Amber," I said quietly, "you can't just walk in." She turned, unbothered. What families share? Isn't that what Dad said? I stared at her, trying to find the sister I used to build blanket forts with. All I saw was someone testing the edges of what she thought she owned. That night, I changed the locks. The sound of the new bolt sliding into place felt final, heavier than I expected. Peace, I realized, shouldn't depend on a deadbolt, but in my family. It always did. 2 days after I changed the locks, I was cleaning again, more from habit than need. The apartment had grown quiet, but not peaceful. I moved from room to room, wiping surfaces already spotless, as if order could erase the unease still lingering in the air. That's when I saw it. A white rectangle half-tucked beneath a stack of design magazines on the coffee table. It wasn't mine. I picked it up, frowning at the glossy print. Donna Clark, real estate agent. For a moment, the name meant nothing. Then my stomach dropped. The neat font, the local area code, the handwritten note on the back, "Call any time about the Pearl property." The Pearl property. My home. I sat down slowly, staring at the card. There was only one person who could have left it there. Amber. My hands trembled as I dialed the number, trying to sound casual. "Hi," I said when the woman answered. "I'm curious about listings in the Pearl District. I believe you spoke with my, family recently." A pause. The agent's voice softened. "Oh, right. You must be Claire. Your sister mentioned you. She said the apartment might be going on the market soon. Lovely space, by the way." The words blurred. Going on the market. I thanked her, hung up, and sat still for a long time. The card balanced between my fingers like proof of something I didn't want to believe. So it wasn't about the kids or stability or second chances. She wasn't moving in, she was cashing out. The betrayal hit differently this time, not hot, but cold, clean. like a truth you can't unhear. I thought about calling my parents, about asking how much of this they already knew, but I stopped. They'd always believed her first. Instead, I slipped the card into a drawer, next to a spare key that no longer opened anything. The silence felt heavier than the sound of her laughter ever had, and for the first time, I realized my sister wasn't just desperate, she was calculating. By the next morning, the fear had settled into something sharper, a need to know how deep this went. I called Aunt Joanne Miller, my mother's older sister, the one who never fell for Amber's charm. She agreed to meet me at a small cafe near the river, the kind with chipped mugs and old country songs playing low. When she saw me, she didn't ask about work or the weather. She just looked at my face and said, "They did it again, didn't they?" I told her everything: the family meeting, the red marks on the wall, the real estate card. Her expression didn't change. She stirred her coffee slowly, the spoon clinking against the cup. "That sounds just like her," she said. "And your parents. They mean well, but they've been blind to her games for years." Then she sighed, her voice lowering. "There's something you should know. Claire, when your grandmother passed, she left a small inheritance around $20,000. It was supposed to be split between you and Amber, but your parents gave it all to her. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. All of it." Joanne nodded. "Amber told them you didn't need the money, said you were fine on your own." They believed her. The word hit again, find that same invisible label I'd carried my whole life. Joanne's eyes softened. "I told them it wasn't right, but your mother said it would keep peace in the family." "I'm sorry, honey. I thought you knew." I stared at the swirling cream in my coffee, realizing the pattern had been there all along. Every time Amber stumbled, someone cleared the path for her, and every time I stood tall, they stepped back, thinking I didn't need their hands. Now she wasn't just trying to take my home, she'd been taking from me for decades, and I was finally done letting her. That night, I barely slept. Every memory I'd buried seemed to surface at once: the birthdays I'd been forgotten, the car Amber got at 16, the word fine echoing like a bell I could never stop hearing. But this time, I refused to let history repeat itself. At dawn, I called David Hale, an attorney I'd worked with on a design project years ago. He was steady, patient, the kind of man who read every word before signing anything. When I explained the situation, he listened quietly, then said, "If she's trying to sell or claim your apartment, you need to secure it legally." "I can help." We met that afternoon in his office, the city heat pressing against the windows. David introduced me to Kate Adler, a trust and estate specialist. She was direct and calm, her tone the same one I used with anxious clients. "You don't have to fight them in court," she said. "You just have to make this place untouchable." The phrase felt like oxygen. Together, we set up a revocable living trust, naming me as the grantor and Kate as an independent co-trustee. It sounded complicated, but it was simple enough. My apartment would now be protected under my name and hers. No one could sell, transfer, or borrow against it without my consent. When I signed the last document, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, steady ground beneath me. David smiled faintly. "This should keep her out of your walls, literally and legally." I laughed, but it came out thin. "She'll be furious." "Maybe," Kate said, sliding the papers into a folder. "But fury isn't ownership." As I walked out into the late afternoon light, the city looked sharper, like the edges had come back into focus. I tucked the trust binder under my arm, holding it close as if it were a shield. For the first time in my life, something I loved couldn't be taken from me. Let her come for it, I thought. The door was locked now in every way that mattered. I chose the restaurant carefully, quiet, neutral, with soft lighting that left no room for scenes, the kind of place where people spoke in calm tones but said things they couldn't take back. I arrived early. the folder with the trust papers and David's financial report resting beside my glass of water. When my parents walked in, they looked uneasy. Richard adjusted his jacket. Maggie clutched her purse like it could protect her. Amber followed a few steps behind, her hair done, her perfume sharp enough to cut the air. The children weren't with her. That told me everything. I wasn't the only one expecting a confrontation. "Thanks for coming," I said, keeping my voice even. "We need to talk." Amber smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "If this is about the apartment, I think we all just need to be reasonable." I opened the folder and slid a sheet across the table. "You contacted a real estate agent named Donna Clark to appraise my apartment." Her smile faltered. "That's not she told me herself," I said quietly. "You called it the Pearl property. You even asked about the market value." My parents exchanged confused looks. Richard frowned. "Amber, what is she talking about?" Amber's voice rose a notch. "You're twisting this. I was just curious." "Okay, I was trying to help the family. I didn't flinch. Help them. Or help yourself. You're $50,000 in debt." "Amber, you weren't planning to move in. You were planning to sell it." Richard's hand stiffened around his coffee cup. "Debt?" I nodded toward the second paper. David found it. "Credit cards, unpaid business loans. You've been hiding it?" Amber's face flushed. "You think you're so perfect. Claire, always acting like the victim. I've got 2 kids. What do you have boundaries?" I said. "That's what I have." Maggie reached across the table, her voice trembling. "Claire, please, let's not make this worse." I turned to her. "You made it worse when you believed her over me. When Grandma's inheritance was split, you gave her my share too. Did you think I'd never find out?" Richard looked stunned. "What inheritance?" Amber's eyes darted down. "It was so long ago," she muttered. $20,000. I said. "You told them I didn't need it because I was fine." The word hung there like smoke. Maggie's lips parted, but no sound came. Finally, Richard spoke. Quieter now. "Did we do this to her too?" He wasn't looking at me when he said it. I reached into my bag and placed the trust binder on the table. "You don't have to decide anything anymore," I said. "The law already did. The apartment is protected under a living trust." "You can't touch it. Not now. Not ever." Amber's chair scraped against the floor. "You're so selfish," she spat. "What about my kids?" I stood, collecting my things. "They deserve better than watching their mother steal from her sister." No one moved. The only sound was the faint clink of dishes from another table. "I'm done being fine," I said, my voice steady. "I'm stepping back," and then I walked out. The night air hit like a wave, warm, heavy, but clean. For the first time, I could breathe. In the days that followed, the silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. My phone lit up with missed calls from my mother, a few short messages from my father, nothing from Amber. I didn't answer any of them. I couldn't. The words from that restaurant were still hanging in my chest, heavy and unmoving. It was Aunt Joanne who told me what happened next. She called one evening, her voice quiet but sure. "Your parents confronted her," she said. "After what you told them, and the proof you showed, they couldn't deny it anymore. They cut her off. No more rent, no more bailouts." I closed my eyes, letting out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Amber was left with the debts she'd made. She took a job as a retail manager on the far side of town, working long shifts to keep the lights on. Ethan and Lily started public school that fall. For once, her life wasn't cushioned by other people's sacrifices. A week later, a letter arrived. No return address. But I recognized her handwriting immediately, round and careful, like she'd written it through gritted teeth. "I'm sorry for how things turned out." It began. "You've always had everything under control. I guess I just thought you could handle it. You always do." It wasn't an apology. It was another reminder, another way of calling me fine. I folded the paper once, twice, then tucked it into the drawer with the real estate card. Let them sit together, proof of what I'd survived. For years, I'd mistaken silence for peace, giving for love. But peace isn't the absence of noise. It's the absence of lies. And for the first time in my life, my home was quiet for the right reasons. Time passed quietly after that, measured not by phone calls or family dinners, but by light moving across my walls. I repainted the section where Ethan and Lily's red scribbles had bled through, layer after layer until the gray was smooth again. Each brushstroke felt like reclaiming something small I'd lost. Work filled the rest of my days. My projects grew. Clients returned. I signed a contract to redesign the lobby of a boutique hotel in the Pearl District, the kind of project I'd once only dreamed about. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was building new spaces for strangers, while the one I'd built for myself had nearly been stolen by my own family. David Hale called one afternoon to check in. "Everything holding steady?" he asked. "Better than steady," I said. "Quiet." He chuckled softly. "That's the goal, isn't it?" After we hung up, I stood by the window, looking out at the San Antonio skyline, soft gold in the evening light. Below, the city hummed, cars threading through the streets like they always had, but inside, the air felt still, settled. Some nights, I thought about my parents. I imagined my mother sitting at her kitchen table, stirring coffee long after it's gone cold. My father in his chair, silent, the weight of his choices finally visible. I didn't hate them. I just didn't need them anymore. And Amber. Sometimes I wondered if she'd ever understand that what she tried to take wasn't just an apartment. It was proof that I could survive being overlooked and still create something beautiful. A few months later, I hosted a small dinner for friends, people who'd shown up when family hadn't. We ate, laughed, and filled the room with a kind of warmth that didn't ask for anything in return. When they left, I walked them to the door, and as the last one stepped out, I noticed the key tray on the console. The same silver key sat there, catching the lamplight. I picked it up, feeling its familiar weight in my hand. For years, that key had been a symbol of effort every hour I'd worked, every sacrifice I'd made to build a life of my own. But now, it felt different. It wasn't about ownership anymore. It was about peace. I set it down gently, the metal clicking against the marble final. Certain. They say home is where family is. I'm keeping the home.